Another thing that is important when it comes to programming is I/O operations, input, output operations. You would have already seen us using the output operations by virtue of using cout. But we can also allow the users to enter data values for themselves. And we can accomplish that by using the cin operator. Both the cout and the cin operator are found inside the IO stream header file or library. So let me just go back over here to our demonstration portal. And let's do a few examples involving getting inputs. So we still have our integers x and y as was defined earlier. But instead of the programmer, the programmer, setting the data values, I'm going to allow the users to be the ones who enter the data values. In order to do this, we normally give a prompt so that the user know what they need to do. So enter a value for x. That's telling the user what to do. And after that, we can now accept the values by making use of the cin operation. So it's cin, and note we have now changed the symbol for input. So we're now using the 2 greater than sign, followed by the variable in which we want the data value to be placed. We're going to do something similar for the y value. So we can just copy and paste and modify as is necessary. So this time it's cout enter value for y, and then it's cin into y. And then we can now do the sum. We have done this before, x plus y. So let us say the sum is equal to x plus y. And let us now execute and see what obtains. So note it's asking us to enter a value for x, and it's awaiting the input. So let's enter 10. So 10, then the enter key. It's now asking for a value for y. Let us put in 5. And then the enter key. And we're now seeing that the sum is equal to 15, which 10 plus 5 gives us 15. So we have just accepted some user input, and we have processed that user input to generate an appropriate output. In this case, we have used integer values, but we could have also used floating point values as well. So I'm changing the data type of x and y to float, and we are going to re-execute. It says enter value for x, so let's say 2.5. Value for y, let's say 1.8. And then when we add those, then we end up with 4.3. So once again, the user was able to enter the data values within the system or into the system, and the necessary calculations were performed. The other thing that might become important for us is to know how to treat Boolean values. So let's say we have a Boolean value called paid that will indicate whether or not a person has paid their school fee. Now we have to treat this a bit differently. So let me demonstrate what is happening here. So if I store a value inside of paid, let's say the value is 5, and I do a cout of paid. So paid equal, and then I get the value that is inside of paid. When we execute, please note that even though I put the value 5 inside of paid, what paid is representing now is the value 1. And it's important to know here that for a Boolean value, any non-zero is equal to true, and a 0 is equal to false. Now, a true is represented as a Boolean value, which is going to be a 1, and a false is going to be represented as a Boolean value, which is going to be a 0. So please note that, because this is important. So whenever we say that something is true, it equates to a 1. And whenever we say that something is false, it actually equates to a 0. So any non-zero value is going to be a true value within the system. And that is why we are seeing that paid is equal to 1 here, because 5 is a non-zero value. Another non-zero value would be something like negative 73. And if we re-execute, we are seeing once again that paid is equal to 1. So whether it is negative numbers or positive numbers, as long as they are not 0, then that value is going to be represented as being a true value. If we place a 0 though, and we re-execute, then you now see that that is represented as being a false value. So this is something important to note when we are dealing with Boolean values. So in a sense, whenever we are dealing with Boolean values, we really just use the keywords true, or we use the keyword false. But it just helps to understand that under the background, any non-zero values are going to be represented as being true. And also under the background, a Boolean value is actually an integer value at its core. So paid is assigned true. We execute. We see that that is a 1. And if paid is assigned false, and we re-execute, then we see that that is a 0. So that is consistent with what I have been saying thus far. And finally, we need to have a look at how do we treat string values. You already know that in order to use the string values, the recommended approach is to include the string library. Once we have included the string library, then we can now say string and give it a variable name. So right here, we are creating a string variable called address. Because we're making use of input and output, let's do a prompt to the user and tell them to enter their address. We now need to get that address that is entered by the user. So it would be cin, and we want them to enter the data into the address variable. Having done all of that, we now want to show what the address is. So let's put a new line, and then we say your address is followed by the address variable. It's now time to execute so that we can have an understanding of what is going to occur. So it's asking for an address. Let's say 192 Plum Lane. We hit enter. And notice what we're seeing here is that your address is 192. And what is happening here is that once there is a space or there is a new line, then when we're entering the data value into the string, it's going to actually truncate everything after that point. So as long as we hit a space, then everything after the space is going to be discarded. Let's re-execute. And instead of putting a space, let us now put a character like a dash. So plum dash lane. We hit enter. And now you're seeing that we have all of the data values that we expected. So the challenge here is, how do we get to accept a string value that has spaces? And we can do that by making use of an operation called getLine. So on line 18, I'm going to comment that out. And instead of having line 18, I'm going to put a replacement for that. I'm going to use getLine. It's going to take in the cin stream, and it's going to take in the variable where I want to put the data value. And I'm now going to re-execute. And once again, I'm going to now put in the address, but with the spaces. And now you are seeing in the output screen that we were able to properly accept the spaces and display the address in the format that we expect it to be in. So it's 192 space plum space lane. If, for example, I wanted to enter like my name, so I would change the variable name to name. Let's call it full name. And I would now modify the prompt. So it now says enter your name. I can get rid of line 18. You realized a while ago that it's no longer necessary. We're making use of the getLine command. So it's cin, so it's getLine cin followed by the name of the variable, the string variable, which in this case would be full name. And then I would say your name is followed by the variable, which is called name. We execute. All right, so it is called full name. That's my bad. So let's re-execute. So enter name, and in this case, it's Horace Scarlett. And then the output is printed. Your name is Horace Scarlett. And that takes care of it for input and output. And moving forward, we will be using a lot of input and output because we want our programs to be interactive. Up until this point, the programs were not as interactive as they ought to be because the users were not able to enter the data values that were pertinent to them. Moving forward, we will be making use of that a bit more. In the next session, we'll now be looking at functions in a more fulsome way, and then that will kind of round out the knowledge base that you need in order to step up in terms of the programs that you're able to compose.